This week in post, it's unscripted, uncut, and it's a live edit. Hi everyone, I'm Scott Davenport. Welcome to In Post. Thanks for joining me today. Today is a live edit. Live is in air quotes. I'm not live streaming. I'm taking a photo from my library that I've never worked on, turn on record, I'm going to go through processing start to finish. And today's photo is a midday shot. Long exposure, a little bit north of Asilomar State Beach in Big Sur. I shared some footage from that visit earlier this week on In the Fields. If you haven't checked that out, go ahead and have a look. So you'll get some context for the area here. But other than that, let's dive right in. So this is the photo straight out of camera. Nice long exposure. Let me bring up the stats on it here. So we had 244 seconds. So that's, a little shy of 5 minutes. So this was, a full on probably 15, 16 stops of light. And I have to say, even though this is a really, harshly lit scene, I'm kind of excited to get processing on this because there's some nice things happening. I like how this, this bunch of, water here became this nice white mist, but several areas of this cove were nice and calm, so they didn't get as much of that whitewash. So there's nice play between the blues, the whites, and then, the yellowish oranges. A quick image assessment, though. There's certainly some harsh light to deal with. This foreground is super bright. This is really distracting on the left-hand side. Probably crop this in to get rid of that. Maybe a tighter crop here. This rock feels a little awkward. I'm going to have to downplay the foreground for sure. And I haven't decided, do I want to go toward a black and white or do I want to stick with the color? Because I really kind of like the way these blues are feeling right now. But anyway, with that, let's get into it. So crop tool, and let's deal first and foremost with the crop. I'll take it from the lower left because I just want this to be gone. There's no redeeming value in that rock. Sorry, rock. I'm sure you're going to be okay with it though. And what I'm watching now is I'm debating about this little piece here because that's going to be annoying. So let's kind of hit it there. There might be a little bit left. I have to watch up here. Now you start to play these games when you crop is, how far in do you go? And, where do you decide to leave that edge and not introduce a new distraction? Looking at the bottom there, that's pretty cool. I don't mind that curve there. And let's just tug in maybe from the upper corner ever so slightly, just so this becomes a little more of a natural break. That I may deal with a cleanup. I might not because that has somewhat of an extension from this previous rock. That one feels okay. It looks like that side's good. So that's feeling pretty cool. I'm going to go ahead and do the basic processing. I really want to deal with that foreground, but let's get some fundamentals set. Check around the profile. I tend to try out landscape, and I usually try out vivid. And vivid's washing out the blues. Landscape is certainly pumping them up. And I think I like landscape to begin with. That's that initial interpretation of the raw file. I haven't touched any sliders yet. So this gives us a little more play, a little more latitude. All right, white balance. I want that surf to be white. So we'll hit that. That's great. Minor shift. And as we expect, it's pretty close to 5500, which would be daylight. The exposure is good. I'm not going to play with that. I will adjust black point, white point, and then contrast. So I'll start with white point, black point, option key in Lightroom, inching that up. Sure enough, is that foreground, see that white hot down at the bottom there? We're going to back that off and actually lowering it. How about that? Which tells me my white point's probably good. Yep, 0. Black point, I want to get some deep blacks in there. So I'm going to pull that down until I start to see just a little bit of clipping. And I'm okay to have a pure black in the scene. We'll nudge shadows open a tiny bit. I want to play with highlights significantly though. Just start to play around with that. Because that's going to help take the edge off of the very bright rocks, a little bit in the background. Now we'll just play around with contrast. I'm going to push it way too far. And I'm just kind of clicking around a little bit. And clarity, this will be more for the local stuff in the rocks here. Now something contrast did, I just noticed. Let me undo it. And maybe it was the color. No, okay, maybe I just didn't notice it before that this like lighter colored, I think this is actually the sand under the water, and this was more rocks covered with some algae and things like that. That didn't seem to show up before, and I hit the backslash key for a minute. Okay, it's been there the whole time. I just never noticed it. All right, is it showing up a little more now that there's more contrast and difference in that color there. So back to the contrast slider, we'll push that up a little bit. Cool, good. All right, you know, I did not check my horizon line. It looks like I did a pretty good job in camera. Yeah, I don't think I need to change the rotation on that. What else for the basic stuff? Just checking for spot removal. So Q key, and I'm going to hit the A key, which will activate that visualize spots right there at the bottom. And I've got one or two little sensor blobs out there, or maybe it's lens dust, something like that. And that one like there. Everything else looks pretty nice. Q key to turn that off. And you still got that nice hint of the ridgeline out there. Great. All right. So let's do a quick before and after assessment. Before, pretty flat. After, I actually am. There's a part of me that prefers the slightly duller color in the oranges. So that's gonna be the next thing I start to play with is HSL. Tweaking around with the colors, seeing about pulling back on the oranges. I don't think I'm going to need to push the blues anymore. Those look good. So let's get that HSL panel open. And in saturation, I'll click the arrowhead and just kind of hover. I'm not going to click. I'm going to hover over the various spots here. And what I'm watching as I hover, I'm going to move my mouse back, I'm watching to see which one of these color channels gets highlighted. So you expect, I go in here, I get blue. Up in here, I'm getting orange. And as I sweep through, that's orange. These are considered orange. That's a yellow. Okay. So this area would be yellow. Foreground is orange. All right, so I've got basically oranges and blues through the scene, which is not too much of a surprise given a daytime scene like this. So that means I'm free to work with just the oranges. So I can take the oranges. Let's crush it really far down. We'll see that rock almost become white, right? I don't want it to be that dull. But somehow I was preferring, you know, the downplaying the rocks and letting the blues come through. And I think I'm going to do that. I kind of like that look. Maybe somewhere around there. And also, now that I know the luminance channel for all the rocks is basically orange, we can actually, sorry, the color channel for the rocks is basically orange. We can play with the luminance here just to try to rein in some of that area. Okay, I'm not going to do it that way. Where I went in my head is I was seeing too much interaction happening. We have range masks, and we can actually do color with them as well as luminance. So I think I'll play with dulling down the highlights of rocks with one of the graduated filters and using one of those range masks or luminance masks. Before we get in there, anything else to do with color here? I don't need to shift any colors. Let's try shifting, well, yellow is too far away from blue. Thinking about taking that to a more blue tone. And I just don't think I'm going to be able to pull that off. Yeah, that's going to hit the, you can see here in this area, this is more aqua, this is more blue. So shifting aqua toward blue, we're seeing a downplay in that, but that's really not particularly meaningful. That's going to do it for the color then. Let's deal with the foreground next, and we'll get into fine-tuning those rocks. So let's get burn preset, which is going to take our exposure down, and we'll just drag this up from the bottom. And let's fine-tune that a little bit. We'll actually take highlights down a little more, really taking the heat off of these foreground rocks. You know, I like that there's foreground rocks in the scene. It gives the viewer a place to be standing and looking out over this, but they don't want this to be so bright that it draws the attention away from the center of the scene. Now I know I'm going to do a vignette at the end of this. I almost always do a vignette to draw the eye in toward the center. So right now this will be enough to take the edge off of that. The corners, well, why don't we do this? Let's go ahead and duplicate. Right click, duplicate this one, and we'll just do the corners. I'll rotate that like this. I'll do that one more time. Duplicate that one, bring it over to this corner, rotate it around. You know, so these are just taking an additional bit of edge off of the corners. And so adding all those up, we get before and after. This one I think might need a little minor adjustment in position. Come here. There you go. All right, cool. Let's see. Oh, the rocks and the whole luminance mask thing I said like 3 minutes ago. Let's add a new graduated filter, and I'm going to drag it down. So this is covering the whole scene, right? This is something we can do with our graduated filters, even though they're designed to be applied to segments of the photo. You want to add it to the whole photo? Just drag it across the whole thing. Let's zero out the exposure. And first and foremost, let's get a range mask going. So I'm going to do a color range mask. Choose the picker. And notice it says here we can do shift click, say that 5 times fast, for multiple sample points. I'm going to sample a few spots on the rocks like that. Okay. And let's turn on the overlay and see what we've got. That looks pretty nice. All right, so we've got a pretty good mask for the rocks. Turn that off. And now we can do some more things with them. First, I'll actually pop clarity up a little bit. So we can have the rocks jumping out a little more, but that ocean's going to stay nice and soft and smooth. We don't want to defeat the purpose of taking the long exposure. And I said highlights. Highlights was the other thing I wanted to play with. So nudge those down a little bit more. Now, let's take a look at before and after. This is going to be a before and after of all of the graduated filters. So the darkening of that foreground and this clarity punch on the rocks. So let's turn them all off. Turn them all back on. Pretty good. Might even pop the clarity up a little bit more to get extra punch into those rocks. Right. What else do we want to do here? I think I'm going to go back to our basic panels here and just go down to the effects area and try out a vignette. If you've seen any of my videos before, you've seen this before. I take the roundness down to 0. I'll take the darkness pretty darn far. Not the roundness, the feather down to 0. So I can see where the vignette is. And let's bring it in a little bit. We'll change the roundness. So we're pushing it out more toward just the corners. Yeah, we'll actually take that midpoint back up because the midpoint is where the fade will begin with, and the fade will go in 2 directions. It'll get slowly lighter in this direction and slowly darker in that direction as we increase the feathers. You see that happening there. And so, yeah, midpoint. If you take it too far down, you end up with a really spotlighty type look on your photo, which maybe that's what you're after. Maybe that works for certain scenes. For this one, I don't think so. I just want a nice subtle nudge on the corners. Let's take a peek at that before and after. All right, so one final tweak here. So I'm drawing the eye in. Scene's looking good. I commented at the beginning I liked how these bits of white foam were looking really cool, but the rest of the scene didn't. Let's target that foam and just give it a nudge of dodging. I'll use a radial filter. Let's zero everything out for a moment. Get a radial filter and drop it over the center of the scene, roughly there. Invert is turned on, which means it'll affect the inside of this particular filter. So all the red area, this is where we're going to get effects happening. We want to get a range mask going. I'm going to use a luminance range mask. And let's turn on the overlay. And I want to just have the highlights happening. So I'm going to take all the shadows and move them away until I get just the highlights. And I'll have to tweak the ranging a little bit here. Something like that. And now we'll tighten up our filters so that I'm not hitting too many of these top rocks. I can always brush it away, and I probably will. Let's open this up a little bit more. Okay, so the mask itself is looking pretty good. Let's turn that off. And now we can go to adjustment. So we can take the exposure slider. I'm going to push it really far so you see what happens, right? That foam is getting nice and bright. But if we just give it a little nudge, 0.2, let's take a peek. Before, after. That's a nice little dodge and burn there. Maybe a little bit more and open up the range a little bit to pick up more of this bit of white foam. And then lastly, I'll turn the overlay back on. I want to get the brush. Go to the erase. Auto mask is good. so I can take it away from these rocks here. I don't want to brighten those rocks. We went to the trouble of decreasing the highlights and brightness there. Only wanted to hit the foam of the surf, and so we'll just work our way through here. That auto mask is doing the edge detection for us. Like that, and we'll make sure that we get this rock. I'm going to do a single click right there, a single click right there to make sure I'm just targeting the rock. That last single click was too much, so I'll undo that. Actually, even the last two were too much. I'll undo both of them. You can see that filled back in. I'm going to be okay with that. And I think we are finished with this scene. So let's take a recap here. Let's do it before I hit the backslash key. This is what came out of camera. And this is after. Well, for tip of the week, how about the HSL panel? Not so much how to use the sliders, but using that little double-headed arrow just to hover over areas of your scene. And you can get a quick assessment of what are the color tones that I have throughout the scene. What are the predominant ones? In this scene, it was blue and orange. And that gave us some knowledge to make it very easy to mask certain areas. Using a color range mask, targeted the oranges, really easy and quickly pick up just the rocks. It's a different approach than using luminance masks for targeting certain areas of your photo. And that'll do it for this week's In Post. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, let me know somehow. Comments on the video below. Questions about photography, leave them in the comments. We want to keep it private. Send it to me through my website. And I usually respond within a day or two, so you won't have to wait around too long. And I look forward to hearing from you. What's on your mind photographically, other ideas that you have about processing this photo. You know, we can all learn about this stuff together, because the great thing about photography, we never get to stop learning. Until next time, my name is Scott Davenport, and happy shooting.